But today I thought I would sort of present a three-part presentation. I'll briefly go over kind of the work that I did primarily during my PhD, what my interests are broadly, and then the more recent work, which I think would be of interest to this unit and your team, and then spend a bit more time, I hope, to discuss ways to collaborate and ways of working together, as I'm currently still also writing a grant, so I'm constantly thinking about ideas. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too. So I'll start off with sort of the almost pandemic I've put here, work where I've done and focused primarily on childhood trust and mistrust. So how children develop trust in others, mistrust, and how that relates to mental health and well-being. And I thought I'd go backtrack a little bit to kind of how I got started as a researcher back in July 2009, which seems like ages ago. And I recently just visited my university, after 15 years and since graduation, and not really remembering much of it. But I'd say these three individuals really were my mentors, and they inspired me to go on a journey, even to consider a career in academia. I never thought I would become, a researcher, let alone stay in academia after all these years. But Professor Adrian Raine, who's almost, a neurocriminologist, but also kind of founding father of neurocriminology, got me interested in thinking about ways in which we can prevent symptoms of schizophrenia early on in childhood, thinking about treatment and nutrition being a key role in that, and in brain development. And he and others, Professor Peter Venables and Professor Sarnath Mende, who sadly both are not with us now, started a longitudinal study in this beautiful island of Mauritius that you see on the screen there. And they do research there. So, if you were to pick a place to do research and to follow cohorts of children over time for many generations, pick a beautiful place like this. But I think the other advantage is that chances of them kind of migrating or moving away is also very low. And that's also the reason, that's the real reason why they picked Mauritius to conduct their longitudinal study. So the Mauritius Child Health Project, which started in 1972, was really how I got involved in research as a second-year university student. And since then, a lot of my work is kind of a running theme throughout a lot of the work that I do, understanding early preventative treatments, but also developmental aspects that we can focus on in children's development to prevent them from developing later mental illnesses like schizophrenia and crime. And so my work, I kind of like to situate it in the context of the larger literature. And if we think about developmental psychology or our understanding of lifespan development, a lot of the researchers have actually focused on, looking at toddler development. How do they develop trust, right? We have classic Piaget, Vygotsky, and thinking. And then on the other end of the spectrum, primarily focused more on older adults and patients, we have clinicians primarily looking and doing research looking at persecutory delusions being one symptom or common symptom of schizophrenia in patients. So this is, if you think of it on the one end, it's extreme mistrust or distrust in others, and that's where you get the persecutory delusions, thinking that other people are actively out to get you. Paranoia, you can think of that at the extreme end, is more well documented in adult populations. And then in the other end of the spectrum, younger toddlers, children, we have, the study of the basic levels of trust and how important that is for attachment, development, etc. Really, there seemed at the time when I started my PhD, sort of nothing in between. So nothing in sort of this middle childhood period that I've tried to make my mark in. So here, we're thinking more about peer influences, negative peer experiences, how that impacts trust and relationships. And certainly as a young person growing up, a lot more of the peer influences are going to impact your future relationships, development, mental health, etc. So it seemed, prime for me to really delve into that area, and to start thinking about how can we measure some of these constructs, because we didn't really have good measures at the time. So my study continued looking at, schizophrenia, early signs of that in development. But as I said earlier, there's no real, really good measures of that in younger populations. So a lot of my work focused on developing new tools, maybe coming with questionnaires and questionnaire items that were appropriate to children, but also another strand is making sure that it's culturally appropriate as well. So I'm originally not from the US, in case you're confused by my accent. I'm from Hong Kong originally, and as Jennifer alluded to, I think my journey throughout my academic career naturally lent itself to me being more interested in looking at cultural impacts, developing tools that work for different cultures and age groups as well. So I've tried to bring that into my work as well. But I suppose a key, we might be wondering, what's this image of a castle in the middle, kind of not even on a moat, but in the middle of a body of water. A lot of times, when individuals experience extreme levels of distrust or mistrust, and we're calling it paranoia in this case, they often are like the castles, wanting to isolate themselves from everyone else. They're wanting to just be by themselves, not really wanting to interact with others in the same way that a castle does, I suppose, standing, in a landscape like this. But what is often misunderstood is that individuals who experience paranoia are also highly fearful of others. So this idea that it's more of a fear-driven behavior than it is an active, they just love being by themselves. So I thought I would highlight that as well. And so in my PhD work, I really wanted to, as I said, develop a measure to measure just paranoia in young people. We at the time didn't know whether this exists in children at all. We didn't know, maybe kind of like today, thinking about mental health and mental health symptoms, we don't know whether children also are able to self-report on that. So in this slide, you'll see sort of 12 questions listed here that constitutes the social mistrust scale that I developed to measure levels of mistrust in children. So the more items you endorse on this scale, the higher the levels of social mistrust. And we've shown that for the top 10% of those who are scoring in the high end of things, this small group of children, even though they're not diagnosed with any kind of clinical disorder or issues, they are really also reporting significantly high levels of anxiety, low self-esteem, things like aggression, callous and emotional traits, the whole bag of what we're calling internalizing and externalizing problem behaviors. So even though a lot of the school children I saw to conduct this study, they were, as I said, not diagnosed with anything, and many of them also doing very well academically. What was less known or less visible to teachers and parents and also clinicians is this idea that there may be confidence and levels of trust in others is also not always high and obvious. So the scale has now been kind of translated into various, I think, 7 languages. It's being used in different classrooms, in some clinical settings in Italy as well. So we validated the measure across standardized measures of trust as well. But certainly, I wouldn't say mistrust is the only symptom you should measure in children's behaviors, but certainly it is highly predictive of also longitudinally also internalizing and externalizing problem behaviors, which I think is something we should be recognizing as well. So those are the items I wanted to just put up there in case any of you are interested. It's a 12-item self-report questionnaire for children as young as 8 years old to report, and they'll say no sometimes or yes for each of these items. And you can see from the items are framed such that it's context dependent. So at the home, at the school, and more generally, primarily because a lot of children struggle with questions where you ask them, in the last 2 weeks, how has this been, right? And I'm sure you all know that as well. And the kind of curve you see here is just showing that whilst majority of the children are scoring between 0 and 3 on the scale, so that's like 50% of them, which is showing they're highly trusting, you have sort of the tail end of the spectrum where some children are really endorsing higher than 7 symptoms at a time, and that's the kind of group that is more worrying. I've, since the PhD, published quite a bit on this, on social mistrust, also looking at heritability of mistrust in twin studies, looking at other social factors that might contribute to this, including things like negative peer, relationships, how this mediates some of the behavioral symptoms that we see in children. We've also subsequently developed more child-appropriate tools that measure schizophrenic-like symptoms in children, which we think is very important, given that many of these symptoms are measurable in young children and adolescents, and that early intervention obviously is a good thing overall anyway. So these are a few papers that, if you're interested, you can have a look. And so, I kind of, going back to this then, this idea of paranoia really has been a running theme throughout my work, and definitely the focus on children and young people. But of course, as we know, COVID hits and you're just thinking, what can I do? And certainly for me, the idea or concept of paranoia still persisted, if not was fueled by the COVID pandemic. And I was then thinking more about, well, how do we measure this, or can we kind of measure levels of paranoia pre-COVID and after as well? So this led me to launch the UCL Penn Global COVID Study with a few collaborators across different institutions. You'll note that the study really was trying to capture more of a global perspective, or at least as much as possible, rather than a lot of the existing COVID studies focus on just one population in one country, for example. So with my collaborators, we decided to create, obviously, an online survey, which then, if I were to just kind of give a summary, consisted of sort of 3 time points, 6 months apart each. So right at the beginning, just before, I would say, well, we put in ethics just before lockdown, but lockdown happened around March, if you remember, and we tried to quickly collect data within those first, couple months. So you have 3 waves and various study variables. As you can see, a very extensive list of both kind of self-reported items on mental health measures, but also items looking at environments, home environments, access to living spaces, physical activity, relationships, et cetera, et cetera. So here's a more complete list, and if you're interested in, if you're statistically savvy and you're interested in accessing data to, ask a question, and the variables are in there, do get in touch with me. I'm happy to share the data with you as well. But just thought give you a bit more of a summary as well. So there were 3 waves. First wave, we had about 2,200 individuals complete, and then that number obviously depreciated with missing and follow-up. We also had new people join as well at different waves as well, and you can see the breakdown. Primarily it's from the UK, then we have about 11% in the US and Greece and Italy as well, and then Hong Kong being kind of low down as well. So yeah, have a look and let me know if you have any questions for that. But I thought I'd give you maybe 3 examples of where this work has taken us. We have since, because of when we launched the study, we really wanted to share the results quickly, as with anyone with running a COVID study. Here's one that might be, of interest to this team, looking at loneliness and the influence of loneliness alongside other mental health measures that we have. So if you look at the blue circles, this is a network analysis. So if you look at the blue circles, those are measures of trust and suspiciousness and schizotypal traits in blue. And then you see loneliness being really at the center of the network, being the most influential variable in the network, and really the linking variable, so to speak, to mental health measures such as depression, the PHQ-9, we have anxiety, poor sleep, stress, and less so with the RPQ, which is a measure of aggression. So one question I had, given the three-wave data, was whether we see the same structure across the three waves. And certainly, given lockdown restrictions and changes, et cetera, we figured maybe we might see the same structure, how things are related, but perhaps the relationships between the variables will be weakened or strengthened over the course of COVID. And so we were looking at, whether the structure was the same across genders, across ages, younger and older ages, across lockdown periods. And lo and behold, it was. So really, it was in lockdown 2, or the second wave, that we saw some of these relationships being a bit weaker. And then, when lockdown easing took place again, then the relationships were a bit weaker as well. But I suppose the main message here is that actually, if we aren't able to think about targeting, anxiety, depression, sleep, etc., given that loneliness, symptoms of loneliness is a lot higher during the COVID, and still is, I would argue, it certainly is a key variable that you would choose to address with things such as social prescribing, as we talked about earlier. But interventions along that aspect, I think, would have been helpful as well. In a different study, one of my DClin students, who is now actually submitting this summer, she was interested in sort of the mental health and environmental contributions to the COVID pandemic experience. So here you're presented with a diagram of sort of cross-lag models looking at symptoms of anxiety and depression across the three waves that I spoke about, and how they relate. And what she found was that although symptoms of depression and anxiety were stable across the three-wave period, that means, it's not stably low. There were definitely different groups showing sustainedly high, sustainedly low depressive symptoms and anxiety. Really, the group that had higher levels of depression and anxiety are self-identified as being female, more likely to be from a non-marginalized community, younger in age, lower SES. They had less outdoor access to green spaces and parks, and across different countries, lower lockdown stringency and higher household chaos. So the household environment also played a role in symptoms of depression and anxiety. And out of all of those sort of factors, low SES and household chaos were consistent kind of predictors of clinically significant levels of depression and anxiety. And again, this group is, the general population. Whoever can, access the survey could take part. And they weren't, they didn't have clinical diagnoses beforehand, but scoring also really high levels of depressive symptoms and anxiety. And third paper by a student who now this is under revise and resubmit, Tammy. So Tammy was interested in looking at how and why physical activity may be related to levels of loneliness, anxiety, and depression during COVID. And here what she did was essentially look at the data from wave 1 of our participants in the COVID study, and then follow them up for wave 4 qualitative sort of interview session. So in these qualitative interviews, she went back to specifically follow up those who self-identified and said they had high levels of physical activity versus low levels of physical activity during COVID, and then kind of went back to interview them, and they were matched as well. So the participants were matched on demographic characteristics to then kind of better understand, well, why is it, have things gone better? Have you returned to your original levels of physical activity or not? Why is that? And many of the participants she spoke with often cited that they were nervous about still contracting COVID and couldn't return back to their normal levels of physical activity. And certainly, during COVID, that allowed participants to really understand the mind-body connection, so how important the physical activity it is to be engaged, but that can help with their mental health, and vice versa as well, so it's not just one way. This work is also submitted as part of her DClin dissertation. So here are, I suppose, 3 examples of how you may want to use the COVID study data, and we're continuing to publish with it, so happy to take questions if you have any. And so one of the other things that we really did or had the opportunity to do during COVID was to engage with scholars from around the world. So the one aspect that I really liked about conducting a COVID study is being able to just invite whoever to go on a webinar and just have a chat and discussion. And through that context, I learned through talking to economists and architects, consultants, and even entrepreneurs and startup people who care about loneliness, that I realized that there's more shared kind of knowledge than there is, different ways of doing it. And this has led to multiple other subsequent collaborations with the architects. So now looking at the impact of green spaces on mental health, but also another colleague of mine is looking at the impact of hospital-built environments and how that impacts cancer patients' mental health and well-being. So all of this kind of started with the COVID study. So some good also came out of that. So yeah, so this is sort of the projects that came out of the simple sort of online survey that took place. And I'll be talking maybe in a bit more detail on the co-production type of projects, which I think would be more of an interest that you can see here, the variety of projects. So moving to the recent work, as I've identified sort of 2 projects that really is working with young people, which I'm really happy to be able to do after COVID. One is called the Copewell study, and the second is called Empower Islington. Both of these projects involve working with young people aged 12 to 25, 14-25, similar. Copewell was a study that worked primarily with the youth club in West London. Empower Islington was of young people and the young people who attended community center and youth clubs in Islington. So the gist of it was pretty similar in the sense that we tried to understand the impacts of COVID on young people's mental health and to co-produce sort of solutions or support for their mental health through our sessions. It involved interviews, one-on-one interviews, and then also focus groups, which led to some papers there. You can have a look. But really, we ended up doing kind of co-producing 5 workshops that young people really wanted support on their mental health on. So these workshops included things like empowering young people to think about the narrative around COVID experience and what the power of storytelling in shaping their experience and also mental health. They talked about, lacking motivation and really wanting some tools and resources to help support their learning, moving out of COVID. Things like sleep, many young people recognize poor sleep, and so forth. So we ended up working with young people themselves, social workers, speakers, and also museums to make some of or bring some of the suggestions to life as well. But I thought I would, play a short video which captures what we've done. But I will also want to acknowledge my team of students there, RAs, who were instrumental in making this happen, and then Siobhan, who is the head of youth progression team at Islington Council. So if I just play this with you, hopefully people online can also see that or hear that.
The COVID-19 pandemic seems like a thing of the past, yet its impact and consequences, particularly on young people living with existing inequalities, are still being felt today. However, this is rarely discussed, and so support for this population is limited.
Teaming up with the Youth Progression Service of Islington Council and its young people, UCL researchers from the Empower Islington study learned about young people's employment, education, and well-being challenges and need for support during COVID.
We listened, engaged with young people individually and in groups, and co-created 5 mental health and life skill workshops to support their needs. We ensured the content of our 5 workshops could be sustained to continue supporting young people and youth services in the borough and beyond. What did we do for each workshop?
Workshops included Empower Your Story, understanding our pandemic experiences and how to create a healthier narrative around it through poetry, poems, and stories.
I am done with being complicit, standing still, always thinking about logistic, always slamming the door in my own face, being just a pawn in the game played by the teen race.
Empower your body, rethinking our relationship with our bodies and social media use, and rebuilding body confidence.
Empower your mind, discovering new learning spaces in museums, exploring UCL campus, and learning about career paths in arts and sciences with professors, artists, musicians, and students.
Empower your future, assessing current interests, discovering new career paths, and imagining what life at university may look like.
Empower your habits, developing healthier habits for the mind and body, including new skills to improve sleep, which may benefit physical health as well as studies.
It's really encouraging and informative as well.
Very educational personally to me, as it taught me how to express emotions through art and express mental health through art.
It's a very beginner friendly, very chill workshop.
Want to join? Empower your world with us. Bring someone else along with you too. Check out other Islington events for young people here. Connect to find out more at empowerislington.com or follow us on Twitter at EmpowerISL.
I come away really happy and sure about my life and confidence, because they're teaching us how to have confidence and going out there and just explore the world.
Okay, so hopefully that was a better summary than I put it. But so, you know, as you saw in the video, kind of a key aspect is us wanting to have a legacy. So I think, you know, oftentimes we can be quite short-sighted and thinking, we'll just do these workshops, we propose this, and then that's it. But really, for each of the workshops, we asked young people, we worked with the youth counselors, we worked with Islington Council staff to see what is it that we can feasibly keep in the whole fabric or existing fabric of how things run, to ensure that, you know, young people still has a voice and are able to communicate their needs to the council as well. So here I wanted to put sort of, you know, the part of the legacy. We have the paper, but, you know, now at the youth community center, there's a whole wall filled with art that encourages young people to think about positive body image and all of that. And that was young people creating something that was for other young people. And then there's another jar that has these statements or phrases of positivity that people can refer to. And then that image was a recent image just last month, where one of the, or two of the young people, they invited me to one of their launch parties, because they're launching a campaign to tackle loneliness and mental health in the borough of Islington. And so I went after work. And I thought I would play this little short audio voice note as well of a young person saying, kind of after a workshop on sleep, how that has really helped that young person as well. So.
Can't just
so your body can get used to it and you can like and go to sleep at a reasonable time.
So in that workshop, young people learn about circadian rhythm, and actually the idea isn't to sleep till later or wake up later. It's actually the opposite, to wake up earlier, and then you'll end up getting, tired earlier in the evening. And so that really helped the young person, especially because she's now doing GCSE. So she really valued that. So I suppose, various other impacts. Young people spoke on Independent Sage. I don't know if you know, every Friday, that was the independent scientist group advising on COVID issues. We have a report that's online that people can refer to. ACAM, the charity, asked us how to share kind of experiences of working with young people and co-production. And since then, we've also been able to share findings more widely at conferences. But this kind of image is actually a more formal memorandum of understanding signed between UCL and Islington Council to continue some of the projects and work. And so our project was sort of featured in that as well. I think the second example I won't go kind of briefly gloss over, but this one is, as I mentioned, a kind of co-production project with patients who are currently undergoing cancer treatments at UCLH. And through, again, focus groups and interviews, we were able to design, I suppose, a survey or tool that could allow hospital staff and also doctors to better understand patient needs and their mental health impacts based on the surrounding environment. The legacy, I suppose, we now currently have a tool. It's in its draft form, and we're trying to test that more widely as well. And so the final kind of section, really, I want to open the floor up to everyone also online and in the room, is really some of the work that I'm currently working on. So as part of a collaboration with British Science Association, I'm working with a small charity in Tower Hamlets, where we are trying to create, young people have chosen a podcast that showcases their life experiences, the issues they care about, their understanding of even knife crime in the neighborhood, and things like mental health. So that's an ongoing project I'm currently working on for the next year, and certainly wanting that piece to be self-sustainable. So even after I, remove myself as a researcher, they'll still be able to continue the podcast series. I'm currently an ESRC Policy Fellow based at the Home Office, so within the Crime Analysis Unit, and where I'm doing a lot more work looking at crime reduction at the macro level, I suppose. And so it's interesting to see sort of, how policy gets enacted, and then, in the last week, sort of how general election chaos, what that looks like internally. But certainly I think that has helped me think a bit more about the implications of the work that I do, and certainly the work that we do as a research community, and how we can actually get that, get our findings to the spaces that matter, because, they are clearly making the decisions at the end of the day. And I think it's important to always be mindful of, socio-political challenges, but also not to forget that it is our duty, and we do it really well as researchers, to produce really good, rigorous research and findings. We just need to make that next step of dissemination. So I think this idea of, thinking more creatively about knowledge exchange and dissemination, I think there's something there to think about for everyone. And then a third thing I'm working on, I'm currently live writing an MRC grant, looking at co-developing new tools to get young people, many of whom are in the marginalized communities that I'm working with. So co-developing tools that enable them to access research, for them to be involved in research in a more, feasible way to their existing fabric. So, that's an ongoing, I suppose, piece of, writing I'm doing at the moment. So any contact suggestions of tapping into networks, that'll be amazing. But I'm currently working, I suppose, with the National Youth Association, which has contacts across the nation of organizations that are working with the young people that I really want to hear from. So, and then I think that is it. Want to thank my team, my lab, and all the young people who have taken part. They've been really, really amazing in keeping me going. And thank you for listening.